Okay, so let's start with basic editing. Basic editing, in my definition, is just lopping off the front and the end, giving your show like a clearly defined starting point and a clearly defined ending point. Let's say you're interviewing a guest, you guys are chit-chatting. Some of that you don't want in the episode. You want to like actually start the episode with like, hey, welcome to the show, or whatever line that you open with. But that little banter back and forth with your guest, you want to cut that. You want to have a clearly defined start. Same with the end. When you wrap up, chances are you're going to talk to your guest for a little bit. You want to cut and have a clearly defined ending. And so that's my definition. So those two edit points, that's really all I think about when I think of like a basic edited show. But there's more that goes into it than that. You need to do a basic mix as well. I want you to sound your best. And with the tool that I'm going to give you, it's super easy to lop off the top, lop off the bottom, get those clearly defined start and end points, as well as do a basic mix. And the reason you're going to do a basic mix is because you need to clean up the audio a little bit. You need to like level out the voices. You need to enhance your voice and or your guest's voice. And you want the loudness level to be up to podcast standards. So there is a loudness level that I'm going to get into just in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to clearly define a start point and an end point for your podcast, as well as how to enhance your recording and or your guest recording. And that's with a tool called Descript. That's Descript. One more time, Descript, Descript. And there's some very simple automated processes that you can do. Within a matter of minutes, you'll have a pretty damn good sounding podcast for very minimal work, which is shocking. It's shocking how good this can be with just the amount of work that I'm going to show you. So what Descript is it's an online audio and video editing tool, and it functions just like a Word document. So after you've recorded your episode, you're going to upload your file if it's a solo cast, or the two files if it's you and somebody else. And what Descript is going to do is it's going to transcribe your audio. And this is super cool because then to edit your audio, all you have to do is edit the transcript. So if there are parts of the file that you want to delete, you simply delete the words, and those words, when you delete them, will delete that corresponding audio. So literally you're editing audio just by editing the transcript. So to create a start and end point, super easy. You scrub through the transcript, go to where you want the show to start. It's probably going to be like, hey, welcome to the podcast, or whatever you open with. Boom. Highlight everything before that, hit delete. Boom. It's going to cut everything before that point. If you want to go to the end, same thing, right? When you wrap up, drop in the cursor and cut everything after that, and then you've successfully created a start and end point. Okay, boom. So your episode is edited. Now you're going to do some very basic audio processing, and that's with a tool in Descript called Studio Sound. It's this powerful feature that uses like AI, artificial intelligence. It's going to enhance your voice and your guest voice while also reducing background noise and room echo. So it's this automated process, and there's tools to do this when you get into like more advanced editing. And those are a little better because you can like tweak every parameter and get real granular with like removing noise only at certain frequencies, or, you know, just really diving in. It's more hands-on. But dude, Studio Sound is pretty damn good. So all you're going to need to do after you make those first two edits within the Word document is turn on Studio Sound. There's a scale from like 0 to 100%. You can apply Studio Sound at 100%. However, I don't recommend that. I'd honestly recommend starting with like processing the audio like 20%. If you start to get too crazy with like all these audio processing tools, you can actually make things worse. So start small. You can always increase how much studio sound you want to put on your file. You can always up it if you need to. It's harder to take away than it is to add. And then the final step for this basic editing process is when you go to export your file, Descript, you click export, you're going to export an MP3. That's standard for podcasts. And then you're going to choose leveling to minus 16 LUFS, LUFS. And you don't really have to worry about what this means technically, but minus 16 LUFS, LUFS, is the industry standard for loudness. And this is going to ensure that it's a consistent listening experience from episode to episode. You know, there's not going to be these big fluctuations between you talking and your guest talking. Everything's going to be beefed up with studio sound and with exporting your MP3 to minus 16 LUFS loudness. Moving on to advanced editing and mixing. And so to really polish your podcast, you're going to need to learn a DAW, DAW. That stands for Digital Audio Workstation. Essentially, it's audio production, editing, mixing software. For more episodes on DAWs, check out episode 10. I did an episode on this, the top 6 digital audio workstations for podcast production. That's episode 10, where I go even more in depth on this kind of stuff. There's a lot of DAWs to choose from. For the sake of this episode, I'm going to recommend GarageBand. That's free on Mac. And I'm going to recommend Audacity, Audacity, and that's free for Windows and Mac. For my definition, advanced podcast editing and mixing is cleaning up ums. Some people say, I went to the coffee shop today. And those mouth clicks you can hear in there, cleaning up mouth clicks, false starts. So a false start is, and then I decided to go to a bar. So you're going to cut all that. You're just going to cut to, I went to a bar. Also cutting the other person's track when they're not talking. So if I'm interviewing someone and my guest has his mic and it's not muted, and maybe there's some, like, you can hear his dog kind of walking in the background, or like maybe his wife or kid or whoever's listening to TV in the other room, and that's kind of bleeding into the file, but he or she doesn't think it's a big idea because they're not talking. If you don't cut that stuff out, you're going to faintly be able to pick it up on your track when you're talking. So cutting that stuff, fixing P's. Please don't pop your P's. I say that all the time. You're going to need to put a fade on every edit. So if you cut if you cut a long pause or a false start, you need to make sure that you put a fade on the end of that audio. That's an advanced technique to make sure there's no dropouts in sound, or make sure like the room tone then doesn't like shockingly come up. Adjusting pacing. So maybe someone's a fast talker, maybe someone's a slow talker, maybe, there's just awkward moments of like dead air, I call it. So tightening that up, cutting that stuff out. Adding in music. I mean, that's going to be huge. All this stuff you're going to be able to do in your DAW. If you're doing the basic editing, that stuff's going to be left in there, and maybe you're cool with that. And maybe it's like a natural flowing, like free flowing dialogue. So cool, leave that in. And there's no right or wrong answer, but eventually you should be thinking more about how to polish your show. Once you've developed a good workflow, you can really get granular and make cuts and boosts to really fine tune like your voice and your guest voice. Whereas with Descript, like studio sound, it's just like a all-in-one process that you can't really get control over to a T. And if you're thinking about doing advanced editing, I think these are some things that you should think about. This is really how you form like a well-produced podcast. And so if that's the route that you want to go, I really recommend that you learn a DAW and you focus on really polishing up an episode. I think the basic editing is a great first stepping stone. You're going to get over your fear of like what goes into editing and mixing. You're going to do these automated processes, and it's probably not going to sound exactly how you want, but it's going to sound pretty good, and it's going to give you the confidence to keep going and to realize like, oh, I can start to do this. I can learn, these tools are good enough for me, and maybe they'll stay good enough for you, but maybe you'll want to slowly improve and learn more. But I think it's just important for podcasters and content creators and humans in general to try new things. So wanted to present you guys with this and hopefully get you thinking about where you fall along the spectrum. And yeah, maybe there's a middle ground too. It doesn't have to be so black and white between like basic and advanced. I think the initial phase of like learning to edit or any of this podcast stuff is really intimidating. So start with the basic. Just know that after, you're going to know that you just like accomplished something. And it's going to give you the confidence to keep going, to learn more, to know that you're capable of being a podcaster and being a podcast editor and mixer, and, give yourself a pat on the back, put that on your resume. You started podcasting and now you're crushing it. Don't strive for perfection.